Hi, welcome back to another video.
Hi, welcome everybody. First thing before I even get going, I want to address something. I know in my last video where I made a Ouija board, you can look up there I think, or maybe over there, up in one of those corners or down below. I made a Ouija board using my laser, and I said in that video that the next video would be me enhancing that. Well, I'll let the cat out of the bag a little bit. I'm enhancing it with robotics, but that turns out to be a lot harder than I expected. I don't know why. It's always harder than I expect. But I wanted to get a video out to you in the meantime, so that brings us to today's video. I apologize for all the skulls. I had to dump out my bucket of skulls, my bucket of skulls, because I needed the bucket to do some household stuff. And so I'm just storing them here on my skull pile where I work. But some of these pieces are actually part of today's project. This right here is a skull 3D print, well, part of it, that I printed. I'll put the link to the 3D print down in the description below. But I printed this off, I enlarged it because I want to make a stand to put my headphones on, and I want it to look like something I would use, and a skull fits the best. Now, one thing is, this right here is technically, this is called a life-size skull, and it probably is. I don't know. I'm not a fleshologist, so I don't know how much extra bulk all of the flesh and muscle will add to this to make it, but this seems small to me. But this is about the size. Here's another life size, and look, they're about the same. This is about the size you always get when you buy a life-size skull that's not a real skull. I want something bigger that's more like the size of my head. Maybe I have a big head, I don't know. But basically the size of my head with all the flesh on it, and so this skull is considerably larger. Let's see if you can see the difference. It's hard to tell, but trust me, it is. This print is really cool. It comes in 5 parts. It's 3 prints. We got this, so it prints this way with the bed down here. It prints up there. What happened is I was printing it in gray, ran out of filament, finished it off in black. So we print that piece, then we print this piece, which is the back of the head. Fits like this. And to keep that together, it comes with 2 pegs that fit beautifully right in here and here. They line everything up right there, hold it in place. And then we've got the jaw. And I know because they're all black, it's hard to see. But as you saw, I wanted it to be gray. There are slots here. You put it in, and there's our skull. To glue this together, I would normally use CA glue, but somebody in my household borrowed my CA glue and left the lid off, and now it's a CA brick. So I'm going to use E6000. I've heard this works fine with PLA plastic, which is this plastic. See this? This is the logo of MakerBot, who made this 3D model. And it's really cool because it's got a ring around it that's indented. I'm going to use that as our mounting place. So I just need to get some pipe that fits that. Now while the glue is drying on that, I'm going to start building the base. And here I'm going to use wood and make a coffin-shaped base. And I want to decorate the sides with some interesting shapes, so I designed something in Illustrator, then cut out the layers with my laser beam. Okay, back to the skull. This is now dry, and we need to make it smooth, but it's really hard to see kind of what the surface looks like, especially with the black filament. So I'm going to start by spraying this with a coat of primer. And the primer that I use, along with all the materials that I use, will be listed in the description below. I've got some affiliate links there. If you want to get some of this stuff, feel free to use those links. It's a great way to support the channel. It doesn't cost you anything extra. So we're going to let that dry, and while that's happening, I'm going to glue together the decorative pieces for the sides of the coffin. So I'm just using regular wood glue here, and I'm going to clamp these each together first, and then once these are all dry, then I will glue them each to the side of the coffin. Let's get back to preparing the skull. So now that the primer is dry, I can tell that there are some raised areas here at the seam. And so with my Dremel tool, I'm going to smooth those out so that it's as even as possible. Now I've got to fill in this gap, smooth it out. So to do that, I'm going to try using this plastic wood. I found that the easiest way to do this is to just, with a glove on, grab a glob of it and just push it in and try to kind of smooth it out the best I can. When this dries, you can just sand it smooth. And I also want to make sure that I don't accidentally fill in any of the detail cracks that are meant to be there. And after sanding this all smooth, then I'm going to spray it with another coat of primer, which will smooth it out even more. And then we're going to take the next steps, which I outline in another video, in one that I'm show how to make 3D prints look like metal. The preparing of the print is the same. I've got a link down in the description if you want to watch that. Now that the Bondo is dry, it's just time to sand. And I will go up through the grits up to about 400. It can be hard to tell if you're actually smooth because you can still see the layer lines. But a lot of times what you're seeing is the Bondo in between the layer lines, making it smooth here. So after I sand all of this, I'm going to cover the whole thing again with primer so that we can get a better idea of what the surface actually looks like. And after repeating that process until I'm satisfied with the finish, now I want to make the pole that is going to hold this up. Now this is a coupler that goes over a 3/4 inch brass pipe, or copper pipe, and it fits perfectly. This is completely by chance. I didn't know that it was going to be that way. But now with the copper pipe attached, I can tell that the skull seems to be facing downward too much. I want it to slant up a little bit. So I think we're going to bend the pipe right about here to make it be at the angle that we want. And I found that the best way to do this was to just cut a V shape into the pipe. That will give us a thin side that we can then just bend over. And with copper, you can soften it by heating it up like this with a torch and then dipping it in water. It'll cool it down to the touch, but also makes it soft. Then I put the coupler on, put it in place, and then just used leverage to bend it. Then using a pipe cutter, I just cut off the length that I need. And now it's time to add the bottom connector. So I'm going to connect it to the coffin-shaped wood using this thing. It's called a flange. I'm able to screw that in. And then this fits over the pipe and can screw right into the flange. And there we go. It's now all on its stand. So now let's decorate the stand to look more interesting than just copper pipe. And I'm going to start by using plumber's putty, which is an epoxy putty that is 2 parts. You blend it all together with your hands, you knead it together, and then I'm going to use this for all of the joints and to keep everything together, basically to glue the pipe together. Now I'm going to cover the pipe by making it look like a tree, and so to bulk it out a little bit so I don't need to use as much clay, I'm going to use a pool noodle. I'll start by cutting a slit all the way down so that I can just fit it over the pipe. And this length is longer than what I need because I want to also have like roots and also some branches. So then I fit it into place and I will tack it down with some hot glue. And I want the tree to be crooked so it's not obvious that there's a pipe in here. So I'm going to cut some
angles in on this side, and we're going to add a little bit of extra on the other side.
To cover the tree and do the actual texture on the tree, I'm just going to use the leftovers of whatever I have before I do anything else. So you've already seen this epoxy putty. I'm going to use the rest of that. And then this over here is Magic Sculpt, which is the same, very similar to this, if not the same thing, but the two things are in separate buckets. If you've watched my channel, you've seen me use that before. I use it for lots of things. This stuff is very old, and I've got to use it all before getting new stuff. So I'm going to use all of that.
I start out by covering the whole thing in a thin layer of putty. I'm not worried about texture or directionality. And that used up all of my Magic Sculpt and the plumber's putty. This is it a day later. It's all hard. And it's time to put the actual texture onto it. So I bought some new epoxy putty. It's a 2-part epoxy, just like the Magic Sculpt. I've never used this brand before, but we're going to give it a try. And for the look of it, I found some reference. This is an olive tree, and this one's an extreme example, but you can see that it's kind of like tubes, and it also feels twisted. So to kind of try to get that same effect, I'm rolling clay noodles or snakes, and I'm gonna kind of lay them side by side, push them in to make a twisted kind of direction. And because I've never used this particular clay before, I don't know what its working time is, so I'm going to add the actual bark texture as I go. To make that, I'm taking some aluminum foil and I'm squishing it up kind of in an accordion so that there are kind of some straight line directionality. And then I'll just press this in, and it adds a really cool texture over top. And halfway out of impatience and halfway out of the desire to add variety, I started to lay some kind of flatter, wider pieces, but I tried to keep the directionality going. And it turns out that the working time on this is about 20 minutes, so I went ahead and covered the whole thing, and then I came in with a silicone brush and just kind of added some dents that increased the directionality. Then I went over the whole thing with the directional tinfoil texture. And it's all done and textured, but I want to add a little bit more detail. So I'm going to add some knobs here and there and some veins and just extra features to it. And then we'll let this dry overnight. Okay, it's time to start painting. Now I prepared this by spraying everything, the wood, the clay, the skull with primer. And now I'm going to do a base coat. I'm going to use black spray paint for the wood. The skull, of course, I'm going to use this off-white ivory. And for the trunk of the tree, you might expect it to be brown, but I went outside and looked at all of the trees in my neighborhood, and I found that most of them were gray. So I'm going to start with a gray undercoat. We'll kind of go gray. If it looks too much like stone, we'll just keep adding brown in. Okay, I've got all my base coats down, and now I've got my palette here with a bunch of dry paint on it, but I'm going to put down the paints that I'm going to use. I start by doing a wash of the green mixed with a little bit of brown, just in various places, and then I wipe it off with a paper towel. Then I do the same thing with the various browns. And then, using the gray, I'm dry brushing all over it. But I felt like it felt a little bit more like stone after this, so I went back through with some light brown and did some washes, and this introduced a little bit of color into the gray. And even after this, it still felt a little bit too gray, so I decided to make it much more brown. So the way I did this is I took some very watered down burnt umber paint, and it seems really strong here, but it's so watered down that when it dries, it's going to be very transparent. And, you know, in places where I feel like it was way too strong, I just dabbed it off with the paper towel. And you can see here what it looks like when it's dry. There's a nice mix of colors here, but let's get even more contrast in it. To do that, I took raw umber, mixed a little bit of black with it to make it even darker. And then I'm doing a wash here, and I'm trying to just make sure that this gets down into all of the little crevices in all of the gaps. And then I wipe it all off the best I can, pretty aggressively right away, and it just stays behind in the gaps. And the last thing that I want to do is I'm going to dry brush again, this time with a very light kind of tannish color. And I'm just going to do it very lightly over the highest parts. This will bring out the detail. And with that, the tree trunk is done. Now let's move on to the skull. And I'm not going to go into a bunch of detail on how I painted this because I've got a whole video that goes over this. It's linked down in the description below if you want to watch it. But the idea is the same. It's just a bunch of layers of washes. Paint it on watery, wipe it off, and use lots of different colors.
Okay, for the base, we're going to, for some of it, put some moss down. So I'm going to use hot glue. And I'm just going to kind of squooge it right up in there. So this stuff is so messy, and it like just constantly comes apart because it's all dry and dead. I'm going to try to pull off some of it while I can, but it made me think of something. So this is the way it's going to sit on my desk. And who knows, occasionally I might want to set things here. And if I've got this stuff on here, it might cause a huge mess. So I'm actually going to try using the mess against itself. Look at all of this. Can I just make some more? Yeah. Look, I can just crumble it up. That's awesome. Okay, so I've made moss dust. Now I'm going to use some Mod Podge, and I'm going to try just painting some here. We'll drop some of this moss glitter on it. Yes, look at that. Okay, I'm going to keep doing that.
All right, that looks really awesome. That worked out great, and this is on there really good. It doesn't come off. And I think that means I'm done with this, except I just want to do a quick coat of clear spray varnish to protect the paint. And then let's look at the final result. I love the way this turned out, and I had a lot of fun exploring new ways of doing things. If you enjoyed this video, please let YouTube know that other people might like it by giving it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content like this in the future, please make sure to subscribe. And until next time, don't be bored. Be creative.